process of me standing on the field, trying to play 100 games. So however that looks, who knows? But that's what we have a plan here, and that's what we're going to stick to.
Welcome back to another edition of Enough Said. My name is Dan Barreiro. I'm joined as always by Justin Gaard and Lori Fisher. Maybe we need to work out some plans where, because it's very easy to get injured, pull a muscle on any of these sets.
It has been, yeah.
So maybe we need to go to a Buxton kind of a plan. What do you think?
You need to just watch out for all the wires and all the cables and everything.
Well, we do have that plan. It's called Summer for Lori, and that's when Natalie's here. That's when Ryan Ravlin's here.
I'm sure you guys just haven't filled out your time
We have
off
not. No, our
request
vacation days. No, we haven't yet.
So.
Load management's very important.
Okay, let's talk Twins. They are working to make sure star Barreiro Buxton stays healthy. The center fielder has knee issues, but those planned rest days aren't very popular with fans. The Twins are first, though, in the AL Central and play the Royals this weekend, but without Royce Lewis, who was sent back to the Saints stand, and he did a pretty good job with the Saints last night, despite them losing.
Well, it does seem to be kind of a contradiction we have going on here, where people are complaining about a lot of things involving a team that is in first place.
Yeah, they're playing well.
In a bad division. What are we? I think 5-6 games over 500, which isn't, a dominant record, but is a good one. But it's almost like, in some ways, the Twins can't get out of their own way here because the Buxton drama, the way it has played out and the way the Twins have handled it, I can remember the last time they handled something this badly involving an important player and injuries. It would go back to Joe Mauer. It's almost uncanny how we get ourselves in these positions, and the organization itself doesn't seem to help the player out of it. In this case, by refusing to use him in the 10th inning of a home game against a division rival with the game on the line, because apparently it was going to take him 4 hours to loosen up. And then the next day under heat because of their not using him, then going with we got a plan. And when you find out, everybody's got a plan and that's good, but when you find out that the plan is asking for the player to miss more than 1/3 of the season, it's not inspiring, it's not going to excite anybody, and it doesn't excite me.
Well, it's funny that the ball guys always like to say process over results.
Yes.
Right? They always used to do that. And now they're all saying, we're in first place. What do you want? Everybody's emphasizing the results of all of this. The process this week has been brutal. It's been really, comical if it wasn't so sad. And here's what I don't like about it. First of all, and I said this on the radio with you, Dan, if you want to play Buxton 100 games, you want to be cautious with the knee. I think that's somewhat defensible, but to say that he couldn't pinch hit on Saturday night because it would take him too long to fire up and get ready to go is ridiculous.
It's unacceptable.
When he's 27 years old, get him out there for an at-bat. That's it. Again, if you want to do the 100 games thing, I think we all understand Buxton on the field has been an issue for the last couple of years. And then with Royce Lewis, again, if you think he needs more seasoning, if you think he needs more AAA, I could understand that. But when you explain it by saying, oh, man, we don't want him bouncing all over the field, playing positions he's literally never played in his entire life. We don't think that's productive. That's where you lose me, too, because by definition, there's 9 positions on a field. He's not pitching. He's not catching. He's going to play 7 positions maybe. I think he'll be able to wing it on an occasion or two if you want to keep that bat in the lineup. So, again, it's not about the decisions themselves, which in a way it could explain them away. It's the feebleness of how they've explained these things that leaves me puzzled a little.
30 seconds, Dan.
The organization, this is, I think, in both cases, a classic example of an organization that prides itself on being part of the new intelligentsia of baseball, really smarter than everybody else, and there's different ways to look at everything. And you end up outthinking yourself. You end up making simple situations seem like a Rubik's Cube and very complicated. And for the life of me, I don't get how the team profits from it. There's a really bad vibe, even a 162-game season, to have a home game against a division rival, and you're excited, you're there. It's a 65-degree night, by the way, not 35 degrees. And the game's on the line in the 10th inning. You need a run to extend the game. And you got Buxton on the bench, on the dugout, and you got, I'm sure, fans going, Buxton,
Byron,
perfect time.
good spot
Maybe
for
he
him.
hits a 2-run home run and wins the game. And you're told, no, can't do it because we decided before the game and it's going to take him days to get ready. That has a bad impact on, I think, not only, like I said, the fans, but also the players, even though they're not willing to admit
Well,
it.
and by the way, they'll remember that when you're not in first place. So if you want to flex on the whole first place, what can you argue with? Okay, that might, maybe if that's the case the entire year and next year and for the rest of time, then yeah, but they'll certainly remember that if the word comes.
And unlike you, 100 games for me, if that literally is the standard you believe you need to go to, I wouldn't have signed him. That's not real. That's not real life in baseball. That's too much of a concession to whatever goes on inside his body.
Okay, next up, the Wild had some postseason comments this week. One of the big things that came up, having to pay the price for buying out Zach Parise and Ryan Suter. That next year the cap hit will be nearly $13 million. General Manager Bill Guerin doesn't seem too worried, though.
Would we love to have that cap space? Of course we would. But you know what? We knew exactly what we were doing. We knew exactly what we were position we were putting ourselves in. I'd do it again, and we're just going to deal with it.
He says he would love to have both his goalies back next season. Dan, Justin, you guys spoke to him on Thursday. The conversation got pretty juicy, talking about being I think that's how it's being described, competitive world. I liked when he said it's not middle school or high school.
Yeah.
And tough decisions have to be made, and that he gets extremely annoyed. He used some other words when people bring up what to do with Matt Dumba. So it got a little heated. Do you want to talk about that conversation?
Well, we always like having them on because it's not cookie cutter.
Correct.
Let's put it this way. The average Rick Spielman interview, for example, oh my God, you could never get anywhere with him because you couldn't really have a conversation. He was on autopilot. He basically had decided what he was going to say even before the interview began. What I like about Guerin is he lets it fly. Doesn't mean you have to agree with him. Doesn't mean he's right about everything. But there's some give and take, and that's what took place. The issue with Guerin that I think he's missing is I think he thinks people are demonizing Dumba more than they really are. I think what we're saying is he's a legitimate hockey player, a top 4 defenseman, but if something's got to go, does it make more sense to try to hold on to the scoring potential that Fiala realized this year than it is Dumba, who I do think, more than clearly the GM, is not quite as valuable as he has suggested, and that's where kind of the argument got a little bit pear-shaped. And to me, Justin, it's an important decision because as much fun as we're having with this thing, this team and this GM and this coach, they need to make some hard decisions if we want to give the club, they want to give the club the best chance to finally advance on what was this year a really good regular season.
Well, and everything would indicate, including that conversation from Thursday, that's available on the iHeartRadio app, by the way, the Dan Barreiro Bumper to Bumper show, if you want to go back and listen to it. The Fiala decision, it seems like, has already been made. With what he has said
100%.
about Matt Dumba on Thursday.
3 good months.
And really, well, that was vicious.
But
that's a good example of a guy's emotion kind of telling you exactly what he's thinking, but also the moves that he has made in the last year or so with who he has decided to sign, who he has decided to bring in. The fact that he said, I want to keep both goalies. You can't keep both goalies and Matt Dumba and Kevin Fiala. And it is interesting because I don't think people might be criticizing Dumba for the decision to play in the postseason and the way he has played at different points in his career, but no one is saying he's a bad player. The reason you bring those two up together is because they're both good players. And they both cost about the same amount of money, and they both represent big financial investments, and you can't do all of those.
30 seconds.
That's really the only reason. That's what I think Guerin has kind of shifted the conversation there, saying, why is everybody hating on Matt Dumba? Nobody is. People like Matt Dumba. That's why this has been seen as a difficult decision. But it appears, all intents and purposes, that Kevin Fiala has played his last minute as a Minnesota Wild member.
It was interesting also that he did agree with us that the real lost opportunity was Game 4 more than Game 5 and 6. We didn't have a chance to talk about this, though. If his team wants to get better, I think it's got to, generally speaking, get better defensively. Now, I don't know if that's changing players, if you can change enough those players. But this team was very explosive offensively, which was new and exciting. And because we were unaccustomed to it, we kind of let the other stuff go.
Right.
The defense needs to be elevated and raised up. In general, 5-on-5, and quite frankly, we know this in the penalty kill. And that's another big part, should be another big part of the conversation this offseason.
You also told him you were going to call him next week.
I am.
So don't forget.
It's in the works.
But will he pick up?
I think he will, actually. And he will. I think he's a guy who likes to go off the record. So I'm guessing we're going to get some off-the-record commentary that might be kind of juicy.
Yeah, another juicy conversation. This is juicy too.
Oh,
Alabama
very.
football coach Nick Saban went after Texas A&M's Jimbo Fisher, saying that A&M bought every recruit on their team. Saban referencing name, image, and likeness deals, basically saying the school, teens, and their parents broke state laws. Saban has apologized. This has gotten a lot of play, but the damage is done. Justin?
Middle of May, and college football is at a fever pitch. This is NFL-like, is it not? That they are absolutely stealing the headlines. And I agree with both sides here. Both sides are right in this scenario. Nick Saban, his view is name, image, and likeness wasn't necessarily supposed to be used in recruiting, but smart coaches have realized that you can do it.
Yep.
Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M has realized football's a pretty big deal down here in Texas. We have a lot of people that make a lot of money and want to give it to the Aggies. Why don't we take advantage of that? So Nick Saban is right. Texas A&M used it for recruiting, bought, if you want to call it that, every player. And Jimbo Fisher is right. They didn't break any laws. They didn't break any rules. They are exploiting the system that is now in place. And really, it's an argument of if you like that system or if you don't like that system. And Nick Saban, by the way, will find a way to make it work for him. He's done it with every other rule change that we've seen the last 15, 20 years. But this is phenomenal. You want to talk about taking calls going off the record? Jimbo Fisher says, I'm not taking Nick Saban's calls.
Called him despicable 6 times. I think he used the word despicable.
Deion Sanders is in on this too. He doesn't want to take Nick Saban's calls. Jimbo calls him the god of college football, but go look into his past. It was juicy is the only word for it. But I think both sides made legitimate points.
Yeah, I think that's true. Although I think when Saban makes it sound like what I'm trying to protect here is college football parity, that's a little laughable. Did you see the Stuart Mandel comment on that, Justin? This would be like Amazon suggesting if someone doesn't do something soon, the small bookstores of this country might be in trouble, which I thought was a great quote from I think he writes for The Athletic.
Yep.
So that's where Saban's in a tough spot because some of what he says makes sense, but nobody wants to hear from him because it's difficult to accept or swallow the notion that he's still at this big disadvantage. I was reminded by my friend Rick Bozich out of Louisville that Louisville's #1 receiver coming out of spring camp is on his way to Alabama.
Yeah.
Why? Because Alabama, Nick said, we need somebody.
Yeah.
And just like that, he's gone. And so if that's an example of Nick Saban being at a disadvantage, he's
I don't
a long
think he's
way
saying
from
it
that.
as a disadvantage. I just think he's saying, hey, if this is how you want to do it, fine.
Yeah.
But guess what? I'm going to do it just as well as anybody else. Because that's what he does, whether it's offense, defense, NIL, whatever it is.
Just not going to be very many people feeling sorry.
Nobody feels sorry.
It's time for the Friday night lightning round. First up, the Vegas insider believes that the Gopher football team will win 6.5 games next season. In the 2 of the last 3 seasons, the team had at least 9 wins. Do you think that's too low of an estimate, Justin?
Well, if I say that's perfect, then Hobie's going to replay this on the very first PJ Flex show, probably at the State Fair coming up in August. I was stunned by this because other places have it like 8, 8.5,
How many
9.
games? Are we still playing 12?
We're still playing 12. This one to me seems ridiculously
This sounds
low.
disrespectful.
I think it is. And we can't gamble here legally, but if I could, and I don't think I can either because I technically work for the team in some capacity, but if you're in Vegas, for example, I would hammer the over on that one. That's just me.
6.5.
Yeah, it seems low.
We better hit the over.
Well, that's the better way to put it. Yes.
Next up.
Your guy's the best coach ever. We got to hit the over on that. Come on.
We love Fleck, don't we?
Of course you do.
The Vikings are
You're not going to get a lunch or brunch with him either. Calm down.
The Vikings are holding organized team activities in Eagan. Remember, they have a new GM and a new coach this year. Get everyone to get to know each other, but Coach O'Connell says they're on to the next phase, getting in shape and learning plays, Dan.
Yeah, it's the time of year where everybody
Look at Cousins. Oh, what a spiral.
Unbeatable.
Look at JJ.
Team. So
working on the gritty.
You just can't learn anything from it. But we are finding out one thing, that there's no more concern about fear when we have our coaches around and when we have our front office people
Everybody's
around.
saying hi to each other.
Fear has been made illegal as a coaching device at Winter Park. I'm just so sick of that angle because it's been overcooked from the beginning. It's been overplayed. I hope we can get to some games pretty soon so we can concentrate on that instead of that nonsense.
And finally, a very happy birthday to Bud Grant. He is 95 today. He was the Vikings head coach for 18 seasons, leading the team to 4 Super Bowl games, the most successful Vikings coach in Minnesota history. Justin?
And if you have time on social media, the Vikings did a wonderful Zoom with a lot of his former players, which included Jim Marshall leading the way, singing Happy Birthday. Ahmad Rashad kicks it off, throws it to Jim Marshall, and there's like 50 of them singing Happy Birthday to Bud. But yeah, I obviously never got to watch teams that Bud Grant coached, but it's been awesome to see him in this part, watch you interview him at his house.
Well, imagine the fact that the two of the most legendary sports-related names in this state's history. Sid makes it to 100.
Yeah.
Bud's at 95. It's astonishing. I mean, that is what we in the business call durability and being available.
Enough said. Welcome back to Enough Said. Minnesota's legislative session deadline is midnight this Sunday night, and a sports betting bill is still up in the air. There's a major disagreement to work out. The Senate wants racetracks included. The House wants tribal casinos only, and that could be the potential deal breaker, Dan.
Yeah, it's
that is
dead.
the deal breaker.
It's dead on arrival. It's just so silly. And to a certain extent, I should have seen it coming. We had one of the DFLers on the House side.
Zach Stevenson.
Basically saying, look, we just got to get the Senate, to come up with something, and then we can compromise. There is no compromise about the key element here, which is, on the Democratic side, they want just the native tribal casinos to have complete control over this in those locations. And on the Republican side, they want to broaden it out to include Canterbury, and I think one other spot is
Running Aces.
Running Aces,
Yep.
exactly.
Yep.
And that's the nub of it. And the fact is, that's why to me it was almost a waste of time for the Senate to pass a bill. They ultimately did, or at least one of the committees has. But you know and I know that that's a deal breaker for too many DFLers. They're not going to move on it. And so we're going to sit here once again being one of the few. The question is whether we're ever going to be able to get past this particular impasse.
And will we? Yeah. And will that make it irrelevant? Because we can go to literally every state around us.
Yeah.
Because Wisconsin, we know they already have it. Iowa, they already have it. One of the Dakotas already has it. I think the other one is quickly going to follow suit. But now, it's gone further than it's ever gone before, right? I mean, I think it's at least in the consciousness now. So now, which side is going to break first? Because it's obviously not going to be in the next 72 hours, right? By the end,
no chance.
When we come here next Friday, we're not going to be talking about all the new sports betting options that you have in Minnesota, but which side is going to break first? Because as long as that is the problem and the issue, But so what I'm curious is, which way does the public go? Does the public say, okay, it's time to do something different with the tribes? It's been a long time. We know why that is in existence. We all understand that. Or is it time on the other side to say, let's just get something done, and then maybe down the road we'll figure out a way we can expand this thing?
I think the public wants this to include other places. Now, I don't have polls to indicate it.
I'd be curious.
I think it leans that way. And as I understand it, legally, there's nothing in the previous agreements between the state and the tribes that requires the government to say that the tribes must be the limit, that they must have control of this whole thing. But there's still, let's face it, there's great political influence here.
Yes.
That's at the top of the story that ends up often determining on both sides of the aisle which direction they're interested in going on a big vote like this.
We did, by the way, pass expanded growler sales at tap rooms, which that's at least some good news.
Major hurdle.
They are not going to run out now.
Yes, we're not going to run out now. Now I can stock up.
I don't even know what that means.
Stronger beer at town ball games.
That's how
stronger beer at town ball, because you need it to get through the 5, 6, 9,
every
10.
Wednesday night.
We don't have enough
Fox
beer
9.
options in this state. You're right.
We need more.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, The Athletic is reporting the Wolves are in serious talks with Denver Nuggets president Tim Connolly. Sachin Gupta is currently Minnesota's interim president. Do you think Mark Lowry and Alex Rodriguez are going to go big with that move? And then possibly what else do you think they'll kind of flex or have their hands on this offseason, Dan?
Well, I think there's every reason to believe there's no guarantee that Connolly's going to go, because it'd be a big departure.
It'd be expensive, too, by the way, to get him.
That's true, and that's, I do think, where A-Rod and Lowry come in. I don't think they're going to be afraid early to flex, and that even though they're not in control, I think Taylor might defer to them a little bit on that if ultimately they're going to be paying the freight. What it tells me, too, is, though, they do want to go big. And this is a big name. This is a very well-respected name in the business, and that if they can get, I think would be a feather in the caps of these guys. I don't think there's any question about that. But I think it's a precursor to. They're going to be, for better or for worse, the new guys are going to be very ambitious. And probably a lot of Wolves fans love what they think that might represent.
Maybe, although I've heard from some that say, is this the big swing as success? The Nuggets have been a good organization, right? They've obviously drafted fairly well. They've hit more than they have missed, probably, especially in the mid to later part of the draft is where they've gotten some of their great players. I think Murray was a top 10 pick, but Jokic, for example, was buried, a little bit later. But when you hear, well, we want to get a top 5 guy, well, what does that really mean? Well, that phrase, does that mean Pat Riley? Does that mean Sam Presti? Does that mean Brad Stevens? I don't know. I'll be curious to see how it is received because I think a lot of the hardcore Wolves fans liked Gupta just because we have nothing to judge him on, right? And the fact that they like Chris Finch.
That's like backup quarterback.
And Chris Finch has said, hey, I like this guy. I want to work with this guy. And now are they worried that Finchie's losing some of his clout because the guy that he's back now is apparently going to be coming in from the outside? I don't know.
Conley is top 5. Now,
you think so?
Yeah, I definitely think he's top 5. Riley is not
ungettable.
It's not going to happen, so we can talk about Riley, but it doesn't even matter.
Well, I wasn't suggesting that, but just the whole top 5 thing, I don't know what that really means.
Well, I would put him there. I think they've done a really nice job. And part of the reason I think they have been sort of hampered has been they've been unlucky in terms of injuries.
Next up.
But we'll see. I'm not even convinced they're going to be able to get him, but I think it's an interesting name.
When do you think that would happen?
Next couple of weeks, probably. I mean, before
if
the
it's going to
draft.
happen, it'd have to be pretty fast.
Yeah, I would say before the draft and free agency.
Okay, Wolves player Pat Beverley criticized Suns guard Chris Paul this week and then was called out by analysts, players, other people for being what they said disrespectful. ESPN's Matt Barnes really went after Beverley. Do you think it was a fair war of words, Dan?
Well, Justin loved this, and it's entertaining, you could say, in the same juicy way that that Nick Saban and Jimbo Fisher going at it were entertaining. Here's my issue with it and why it bugged me and I didn't enjoy any of it. And to me, it speaks to the danger. When you start putting on panels like that current players, you run the risk of exactly what happened. A guy who doesn't like Chris Paul with just sort of airing his own grievances and sort of doubling down on the fact that in this case, Chris Paul clearly did not deliver. That's beyond argument. And it just, for me, it gets too personal and too obvious that I can't trust the guy doing it because I'm not even convinced he's doing it for the right reasons because he's still playing. He is still out there. So it did nothing for me. I thought it was silly. I thought all it does is remind people that, by the way, Wolves, speaking of choke jobs, you guys, first round, lost 3 double-digit leads going into the fourth quarter. So, no, I wasn't as amused by it as Justin.
I heart Pat Bev and I heart good TV, and that was great TV. And you mentioned the current player part is kind of why I liked it. But in a way, as a Wolves fan, I'm also terrified by it because Pat Bev just wrote some huge checks that he's really not going to have to cash. That's the beauty of it for Pat Bev, and that's where I agree with you that it's, for him, probably easier to do it because it's not going to be up to Pat Bev next year when Chris Paul comes to town. It's going to be up to Karl Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards, right? And everybody else in the NBA that may be looking at this and going, Patrick Beverley, really? Like Dame Lillard saying, nobody's guarding you. You can do whatever you want. Nobody's guarding you. Nobody's guarding this man, I think was the official tweet. So the people that are actually probably upset by it would be like, oh, man, Karl's probably thinking, I better get healthy here. I hope this platelet therapy works. Camp Ant, as Anthony Edwards says, better go well because those two are going to be the ones that are going to have to cash these checks that Pat Bev wrote earlier this week.
Yeah, he's big, but not anywhere near as big as he thinks. And as you say, other players are going to have to pick up the pieces of whatever damage is caused by what he had to say.